There comes a time in a woman's life when she starts to question the pattern, not just the people, not just the pain, but the actual pattern. Why does it always look like this? Why does love keep showing up in a costume that only fits for a little while, then falls apart in the wash of real life? Why does it start with fireworks and end with ashes? Why does it sound like promises and end like silence? And at some point, if you're brave enough, desperate enough, you start asking, is it them or is it me? And not in the self-blaming kind of way, not in the shame-ridden whispers the enemy tries to sneak in while you're crying on the bathroom floor again. No, this is the sacred kind of asking, the kind of asking that comes when a woman is tired of cycles and ready for truth. This is the kind of asking that heaven leans into here. It's the kind of asking that turns into wisdom and heartbreak into holy ground. Because the truth is, baby girl, you're not just attracting boys. Yours empty. You're echoing unresolved parts of your soul. You're calling in what your heart still believes it's worthy of and what your spirit hasn't yet healed beyond. Boys come running when a woman doesn't fully know who she is, because boys aren't looking for equals. They're looking for shelter. They're looking for a woman to become the mother their trauma never gave them, or the audience their ego desperately needs. And if you're still sitting in the wounds of your younger self, if you're still feeding from the need to be chosen, you'll call it love when really it's a transaction dressed in affection. You were never meant to be a rehab center for broken egos. You weren't created to be a life raft for men who refuse to grow. You are not the halfway house for unfinished healing. But when you don't know that, when you've confused your nurturing for your worth, you'll start thinking that love always has to hurt a little, that sacrifice is the price of attention. And that maybe if you just love him right, he'll finally become the man you deserve. But love isn't supposed to be your crucifixion. Love is not supposed to cost you your boundaries, your peace, your identity. Real love, divine, hounded, grown man love, will never demand you shrink just so he can feel big. But you attract what you believe you deserve. You attract what you're emotionally available for. And if there's a little girl in you still waiting on daddy to say you're enough, you will keep opening the door to boys who resemble the rejection you're still healing from. I know that part hurts to hear, but it's the truth that sets us free. Sometimes we confuse attention for affection, and we think consistency is optional if chemistry is present. But real men, kingdom men, don't confuse pursuit with possession. Real men honor your no. They don't panic when you set a boundary. They don't disappear when the real you starts to show. But a boy will love the fantasy and flee from the truth. A boy will worship your body but ignore your spirit. A boy will borrow your strength but resent your standards. And we entertain boys when we haven't yet learned how to date with discernment. When we haven't yet looked at our trauma and said, you no longer get to choose who I love. When we haven't yet let God rewrite our story with healing hands instead of reactionary rebounds, baby, sometimes you're not attracting boys. You're agreeing with what's familiar. And what's familiar might be the chaos you grew up in, the love you had to earn, the validation you were starved for. But familiarity isn't safety, and comfort isn't always God. Romans 12 verse 2 reminds us not to conform to the pattern of this world, but to be transformed by the renewing of our minds. And this includes how we love, how we choose, how we show up in relationship. The pattern has to break. The cycle has to stop. And that only happens when we realize that healing is the doorway to new desires. That wholeness will change your taste. That once you heal, you won't even be attracted to what you used to tolerate. But healing isn't passive. It's not waiting for the next man to do it right. It's meeting yourself in the mirror and deciding that peace is the new standard. That you're not dating to be fixed or validated. You're loving from overflow, not emptiness. It's laying down the fear that says, if I set this boundary, he'll leave. And picking up the truth that says, if he leaves, he was never sent. Real men, God's men, are not intimidated by a woman in process. But they are also not magnetized by a woman who hasn't owned her worth. There's a divine chemistry that happens when healed people meet. When iron sharpens iron, when purpose meets purpose, when he's not just praying for a Proverbs 31 woman, but becoming an Ephesians 5 man. But before you attract that, you have to become someone who no longer calls dysfunction destiny. You have to evict the lie that says is the best I can get. You have to stop glamorizing potential and start prioritizing fruit. The Bible says in Matthew 7, verse 16, by their fruit you will recognize them, not their words, not their good intentions, not their apologies. Fruit. And baby, a boy can't give you what he hasn't cultivated. You can't harvest manhood from immaturity. You can't build legacy with someone who still thinks love is a game of possession and performance. And most of all, you can't keep asking God for a king while entertaining clowns in the courtyard. The shift begins with you, not with trying to change the next man, but letting God change you. Letting him show you the beauty in being whole, even if it means being alone for a season. Letting him strip the desperation out of your choosing and replacing it with discernment. Letting him fill the empty places that had you confusing chemistry for calling. The truth is, when you start healing, you start seeing. And when you start seeing, you stop settling. So what do you do when the pattern starts unraveling, when you see it clear, not as a coincidence, but as a cry from your soul that you've ignored too long? You pause, you listen, and then you choose different. And baby, choosing different is not always easy. It's not romantic. It's not the stuff fairy tales are made of. Sometimes choosing different looks like deleting that number you never should have saved. Sometimes it looks like sitting alone on a Friday night, hands trembling, heart aching, but not calling the one you used to run to for comfort. That's healing. Not the pretty parts, but the holy parts. Because if we're honest, some of us were addicted to brokenness. We confused butterflies with warning signs. We fell in love with the chase because we didn't believe love could actually stay. We danced with potential because we were scared of patience. But God is a God of fullness, not fragments. And he never called you to love someone who only shows up when it's convenient. He never called you to beg for consistency. God is not a tease. His blessings don't come half-baked and filled with confusion. You have to know that sometimes what you call your type is really just your trauma in disguise. And when you haven't let God rewrite your type, you'll keep calling in the same heartbreak with a different face. That's why he allows the pattern to repeat, not to punish you, but to awaken you. Because eventually the lesson has to become louder than the loneliness. Eventually, you realize that pain is not proof of passion. That suffering is not the same as sacrifice. That you don't have to bleed just to prove you're worthy of love. And I know, sis, I know, you're tired. Tired of pretending you're not hurting. Tired of trying to love people into healing. Tired of asking God why it never works out. But maybe it's not working out because it was never meant to work like that. Maybe it's not working out because God is protecting you from what would have broken you further. Maybe he's saying, daughter, I have more for you. But I need you to believe that first. There's a level of healing that will change your appetite. There's a level of wholeness that will shift your spirit, where what once excited you now exhausts you, where games that used to thrill you now grieve you. Because healed women don't chase, they attract. Healed women don't perform, they exist. Healed women don't audition for love, they embody it. And when that happens, boys won't even feel comfortable around you because your presence will require too much truth. Your boundaries will reveal their immaturity. Your peace will disturb their chaos. Don't resent that, celebrate it. That's the fruit of transformation. That's what it means to grow in grace. You were not created to carry the weight of someone else's refusal to grow. Your body is not a battlefield for unhealed men. Your spirit is not a sanctuary for confusion. You are a temple, sacred, chosen, worthy. And when you start living like you believe, that your world starts shifting. Because the enemy can't win where there is clarity. He thrives in chaos. He feeds off uncertainty. But when you get rooted in who God says you are, you stop handing your heart to people who haven't proven they can hold it. Proverbs 4 verse 23 tells us, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. But you can't guard what you don't value. And many of us, if we're honest, didn't guard our hearts because deep down we didn't think they were worth protecting. We let people come and go, take and leave, because somewhere inside we believed that giving it all would finally make someone stay. But real love doesn't require you to lose yourself. Real love doesn't demand that you become smaller. Real love sees you and stays. Real love brings safety, not survival. And that kind of love starts with the one who loved you first. The one who knit you together in your mother's womb. The one who said, you are fearfully and wonderfully made. The one who will never ghost you, never gaslight you, never give you half of what you need and call it love. Sis, there is a difference between being alone and being available. You can be surrounded by people and still feel empty if the one you're giving your heart to is only giving you pieces. You deserve wholeness. You deserve intentionality. You deserve to be seen in your fullness and still be pursued, not just tolerated. But you can't ask God for a real man while still entertaining little boys on the side. You can't walk into your promise while holding hands with your past. You can't enter covenant with someone who doesn't even know how to keep a commitment to themselves. This is your season to rise. This is your season to release every counterfeit connection, every trauma-bonded entanglement, almost every situationship, but we have history excuse that has kept you stuck in the waiting room of real love. Let it go. Let God be the one who fills the ache. Let him show you that the love you've been waiting for isn't out there. It's being cultivated in you. Because the moment you become aligned, the moment you stop settling, the moment you choose you is the moment heaven starts shifting the atmosphere to match your healing. It's not about attracting a man. It's about becoming the woman who no longer has to prove her worth, the woman who walks like she's whole, who speaks like she's seen the face of God, who loves without losing herself. That woman, that version of you, she's already inside. God is just waiting for you to stop giving boys what was always meant for a king. And now that you see it, now that the veil has lifted and you've looked in the mirror and faced it, what will you do with the clarity? What will you do with the truth that God has handed you, not to condemn, but to call you higher? Because revelation is holy, but it becomes transformation only when you move. Only when you say, I won't live here anymore. Only when you gather up every fractured version of yourself, the girl who loved too hard, the woman who waited too long, the heart that gave too much, and you bring it all before God and say, Here, this is what I've done with the love you gave me. Now teach me how to do it your way. He will. He absolutely will. God is not in the business of shame. He's in the business of redemption. He takes your missteps and turns them into messages. He takes your heartbreak and makes it a home for healing. He takes your regrets and redeems them with wisdom. But you've got to be willing to let him lead. You've got to be willing to give up the fantasy of what you thought it was supposed to look like so he can give you what it's always meant to feel like. And it's not too late. Not for you. I don't care how many failed relationships you've had. I don't care how many times you said, never again, only to find yourself back in the same cycle. I don't care what he said to make you feel like you were hard to love or too much to handle. Baby girl, you are not broken, you are becoming. This whole time, you were in process. This whole time, you were being refined, not rejected, refined, not overlooked, protected, because sometimes God will let your heart break to keep your destiny whole. Sometimes he'll close doors you prayed would open because he saw what was on the other side. And it wasn't love, it was loss in disguise. It wasn't purpose, it was a detour. And when you're his, he will interrupt everything to preserve you. You attract boys when you forget who you are. You attract boys when you're trying to get from people what can only be affirmed by heaven. But when you remember, when you anchor yourself in the identity that says you're chosen, that you're royal, that you are clothed in strength and dignity, the game changes. You no longer flirt with dysfunction. You don't confuse toxicity for intensity. You don't crave what hurts you, because now you're walking in truth. Let me tell you this, real men pray, they don't play. Real men lead, they don't manipulate. Real men cover, they don't control. A real man is not afraid of your strength because he sees your strength as an answer to his purpose, not a threat to his ego. But you can only recognize that kind of man when your heart is no longer looking for rescue, only resonance. That's the shift. When you no longer want to be saved, you want to be seen. When you're not asking someone to heal you, but to walk with you as you heal. When you've done the work in private, so you no longer need public affirmation to feel worthy. And sis, that is power. That is kingdom womanhood. That is what draws real men and repels the boys. You want to know why you kept attracting boys? Because there was still a girl inside you who didn't believe she deserved more. But God is raising up the woman, the warrior, the intercessor, the nurturer, the queen, the one who doesn't just wait for love to find her, but cultivates it within herself until it overflows. She doesn't beg, she doesn't chase, she doesn't settle, she chooses. From a healed place, she sets standards not as walls, but as gates, because she knows her love is sacred ground, and not everyone is meant to walk on it. So let this be the season where you reclaim your narrative. Let this be the season where you rewrite the story the enemy tried to sell you. The one that said you're too damaged, too complicated, too emotional, too intimidating. Let this be the season where you say, I may have attracted boys before, but now I am a woman who knows who I am. I am a daughter of the King. I am an answer, not an option. I am not chasing love. I am becoming love. And God will honor that. Heaven will respond to that because alignment bursts access. When your identity aligns with your destiny, doors open that effort never could. When your heart aligns with heaven, relationships are no longer just romantic. They are kingdom assignments. And when your worth aligns with the word of God, you'll stop begging for crumbs and start preparing for overflow. Isaiah 43 verse 18 says, forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? And I need you to understand, sis, the new thing is not just the man. It's you. It's how you think now. It's how you walk now. It's how you love, how you choose, how you protect your peace and guard your gates. You are not who you were when you settled for that last relationship. You are not who you were when you ignored the red flags. You are not who you were when you begged someone to love you right. That woman, she birthed you. She carried you through heartbreak. She kept showing up when her heart was bleeding. Honor her, but don't stay her. It's time to evolve. The little girl who just wanted to be chosen, she's finally being seen by the woman who now chooses herself. And that woman is a magnet for miracles. That woman attracts alignment. That woman makes hell nervous and heaven proud. That woman is ready for the kind of love that doesn't hurt, doesn't confuse, doesn't shrink her. She's ready for love that partners with purpose. That waters what God has planted. That honors the healing it took to get here. So here's your call. Let the boys go. Let the patterns die. Let the old version of love fall away so something divine can rise in its place. And when it does, when the real thing comes, you'll know. Not because it feels like the chaos you're used to, but because it sounds like peace. Because it looks like prayer. Because it speaks your healed language and doesn't require translation. This is the beginning of the real love story. Not between you and him, but between you and God and the woman you were always created to become.